Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Real American History. I'm your host, Tess Evans, public historian, and today I will be talking about a man named York. So York was an enslaved black man who was born in Virginia around 1770, although scholars aren't exactly sure of his real birth date. But he grew up with William Clark of the Lewis and Clark expedition. And at age 14, York became William Clark's personal manservant and slave. And in literature, York is best known for his role in the William and Clark expedition of 1804 to 1806, when they all traveled west to find the Pacific. Now, it's believed that York was owned by the Clark family since birth, basically. York's father was also named York, and he was a slave of William Clark's father. And his son served basically in the same capacity as John Clark's son, who again is William. And the boys grew up together, though. They worked together and they played together. But upon growing older, York became a fisherman. He was a hunter, a forager, and he traded goods. And along the expedition, because he could swim, Clark assigned him to collect greens along the Missouri River to feed the expedition's crew. He proved himself incredibly useful to the expedition and was actually the first documented Black American enslaved person to travel across the continent. He was also a naturalist, and he helped describe plants and animals. Clark recorded in his journal that York actually showed him a tobacco worm. And if you know anything about tobacco, it's very laborious to produce. And there are these big fat bugs that get on the leaves, and they literally eat the leaves and destroy the leaves and can destroy entire crops if they're not picked off. And so that's what York was showing Clark. So also during the expedition, Clark was fully armed. So he had his musket. He was able to move about pretty freely and was often respected and admired by those along the expedition and by those he met as well. Now, in November of 1805, when the Corps of Discovery, which is what the Lewis and Clark expedition was called, when the Corps reached the Pacific Ocean, in deciding where to camp and set up winter quarters, Lewis and Clark asked each member of the expedition, including York, to cast a vote. So York actually voted as a Black enslaved man. The Native Americans along the way were very fascinated by York, as most had never seen really dark skin before. In 1804, the expedition encountered indigenous peoples called the Arikaras, who, upon seeing York, immediately thought that he was some sort of a beast or some powerful spirit. And there's actually a famous painting by Charles Russell that depicts Native Americans inspecting York, although historians don't really know exactly what York looked like. The depiction is just kind of a metaphor, if you will, for what they think York may have looked like. Clark used York as a source of entertainment with the Arikaras, having him, playfully chase children around, all the while he was growling like a bear and, made the kids laugh. And the Mandans, when the expedition came across them in present-day North Dakota, called York Great Medicine because of his skin color. So Lewis and Clark returned to St. Louis in 1806, so the expedition has ended. And York came back with them, and he was admired for his accomplishments, but he didn't receive the same rewards as his white counterparts, who received land or money. So York did not get any of that. And two things really plagued York after the expedition, and that was one, being away from his master, from William Clark, and separation from his wife. So we know he did get married. And those were pretty major events for him. And York let Clark know that he believed he earned his freedom. So York wanted to be granted his freedom after this expedition. But Clark disagreed, and York remained a slave for at least 9 years after the expedition. And Clark grows a little weary of York, a little frustrated, and York is threatened with being sold. And in Clark's journal, he states, quote, "Send York and prompt him to stay a few weeks with his wife. He wishes to stay there altogether and hire himself, which I have refused. He prefers being sold to returning here. He is serviceable to me at this place, and I am determined not to sell him, to gratify him. If any attempt is made by York to run off, or refuse to perform his duty as a slave, I wish him sent to New Orleans and sold, or hired out to some severe master until he thinks better of such conduct." End quote. So York was sent to Louisville, where he was hired for jobs like driving wagons, and he was abused by slave owners there. And William Clark claimed to have freed York, but evidence of this is still in question, and there's a lot more research that I think needs to be done, if possible, if we can find the possible evidence. But some historians believe that Clark set him free and then set York up in a freight hauling business, but claimed that York was a poor businessman. He lost the business. He was, quote, damned the day he ever got his freedom. So he was angry that he was ever freed, and died in Tennessee of cholera while trying to return to Clark back in St. Louis. But other historians say that York may have traveled west again and lived with the Crow Native Americans. But we may never know completely about what happened to York. We're not exactly sure where he is buried, and we're not exactly sure what year he passed away. So there's a lot more research that needs to be done. But right now, those are a lot of the important points about York that I wanted to tell in this story. So that's it for this episode. I will have sources on the description part of the video for you all to go check out. Further reading, a couple of videos. There's a wonderful book by James P. Ronda that you should check out as well, and those are listed again in the description. So thank you so much for joining me. If you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button, share with everybody you'd like, and if you have any further ideas for episodes, just shoot me an email at realahistory@gmail.com. And until the next episode, I hope you all take care. Bye.